Thank you for joining me on the Investing for Freedom podcast. Today, we've got a really interesting show, and I'm super excited to get into it. I think we're going to get a lot of great information and also just some stories. And today's speaker has an event coming up that's really exciting, nationally known event when it comes to the self-storage space. And we're going to get into just kind of the way that life can happen. You know, there's this old saying that life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And we're going to get into the story about how he got to speak on stage and got to this event and just some of his background. Really interesting conversation ahead of us, I think, when it comes to not only just the self-storage space, but also transitions in life and, you know, why we do certain things, which is one of the things that I started this show for. I mean, anybody can get on and talk about real estate and investing and returns, but when we get into the whys of the choices we've made and the decisions that we make, et cetera, it always gets more interesting to me. So today's guest is Charles Kao, and he is an expert in the self-storage space, which is, you know, it's one of those industries that has been around for a long time. It's always been something that most of us have seen and been interested in, but I think really the last 5 or 10 years, it's really shown up on the scene. And I don't think I've really gone into the weeds on this. And so I'm excited to have you on the show today, Charles. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So Charles, what's got you most excited right now?
Well, one of our fellow Go Abundance Go Bros, Jake Harris, kind of wrote it that, you know, when there's blood in the streets, even if it's your own blood, that's the best time to invest. I definitely see there are opportunities to invest in value-add properties, especially semi-distressed properties that are making it difficult for people to invest because limited options for financing. You know, I think the biggest struggle for most people, however, is rates are rising, but prices are not falling nearly as fast as rising. So how do we balance that delicate balance of, you know, we're getting a better price than what we would have got 9 months ago, but the rate is eating up a lot of that difference in price change that we could have gotten out of that. So
yeah, so you see that as an opportunity?
I definitely see it as an area of opportunity for sure. It's also an opportunity for us to pivot to more of a debt model. So, you know, more recently, my partner and I have started to go towards a debt model where instead of working with banks and paying them, you know, 7.5%, 8% interest on deals, we're just going to turn around and give that to our investors. So kind of a 2-tier structure or a single tier structure. They simply just loan into us on a debt structure and get anywhere from 7 to 9% return. And then we don't have to worry about preferred equity. And more importantly, from ourselves and my partner, it also allows us to potentially keep more equity to ourselves.
I like that. What kind of, by the way, same model right now. We've got a debt model that we're working on in our mobile home park portfolio. And it's really just because we've already acquired, you know, all the properties. And at this stage, we're basically just doing infill. We're not acquiring at this point. Mm-hmm. And so we've shifted to a debt model to do infill, and investors are loving it. So I'm curious we'll get into the 4 questions here shortly, but you've piqued my interest. What's the response from investors? Are they liking it?
You know, honestly, like I did not know what the response was going to be. I posted out a post for a deal for just like a quick, like $1.4 million raise, which, as you know, when you're doing a raise that's that small, the legal fees, it almost doesn't make sense, especially if you have 2 to 3 investors, you know, to do that. And I pretty much had 3 commitments from investors like within 20 minutes. And actually the most common thing I heard from almost every single one of them was they wanted a place to park their funds that were on a much shorter time frame. And also they had IRA funds, because when I looked at it, I'm like, sure, I wouldn't want to do that. If I could do 8% prof and get a tax-free and then also get all the benefits of cost segregation and all that stuff like that, why would I do that? But then I forgot that, you know, people who are investing with a solo 401k or a self-directed, they're not really concerned about that because they already have that tax shelter anyways. So that was one thing. The other thing that we did that was kind of a unique pivot was that we said that they have to keep their funds in the debt essentially for 18 months, but it's a 3-year commitment. But if they wanted to go to, so it was 2 tiers. Well, actually it was 3 tiers. We offered one rate if they wanted to get paid interest payments now, a second if they waited the full 3 years, then we gave them a bigger payment, but then they didn't take any payments right away. And the third was if they wanted an early exit, we would pay them out, you know, essentially like a 5 to 6% payout, which was less than what they initially asked for. But then they also get the benefit that if they find a deal they really wanted and they want those funds, they could exit out as early as 18 months with just 60 days notice. So that was kind of how he structured that. And then that's what really opened my eyes. Like, wow, I can't believe how much IRA money or people that just have funds I want to park short term because they essentially want to see what's going to happen in the next 18 months with everything going on with, government intervention on rates and whatnot.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Well, let's jump into the 4 questions and then we'll circle back to the industry and what you see going on. So if you could narrow it down to one thing that has had the greatest impact on your success, what would that be?
If you asked me this multiple times throughout my lifetime, I think it would change. And then obviously now I have the benefit of hindsight. But I think that the environment I grew up in, it was a tougher environment from the fact that, we didn't grow up like in poverty, but we sure lived like it. My dad was a super cheap person. We lived like, I remember one time he bought me a sweater in 6th grade that was so big I was able to wear it through my senior year in high school because I wanted that Nike hoodie and he's like, okay, you can get it. And then when I went to choose a color, brown is $5 cheaper than the other one, so brown is what you're gonna get. So living like that kind of my whole life with my dad. I remember my parents would try to get us to do baths together, like as tell us as old as possible we were, just to make sure that we could keep expenses down. I think that those collective events was the biggest change for me because I think it allowed me to really realize that like when I think that I've given everything I have, I still can always give a little bit more.
What was your greatest setback and what did you learn from it?
Health wise, I had a health scare where essentially they found cancerous cells after I did this like chemical swab of my mouth, and then they did this like flashlight test and found cancerous cells in my gums and through my throat. So I obviously that was probably the biggest one. Not from the standpoint that although financially it set me back almost 6 figures or just over, I think just the fact that all the mental toughness that was required to get through it. I'm a really some people would call it impatient. I like to refer to as being an activator. I'm impatient to basically get progress and to not be able to do anything, to have my mind race, while I'm, was sick. That was easily the hardest thing I've had to go through.
Wow. When was that?
I was 26 at the time. So this was shortly before the 07-08 crash. So, man, I was just about to say it was a few years ago, but it's been over a decade ago. I do that all the time. I'll be like, oh, this is a few years ago. And then it's like, yeah, so it's over a decade ago. It was actually going on like almost 14 years ago it happened.
Wow.
So I was really young when it happened. So that was what kind of made it even a little bit more shocking. And actually at the time too, as well, one of my friends, his name is Chad. He actually passed away the year before of cancer, and he was even younger than I was. And so I think that added a lot to my anxiety because, I don't think everybody probably maybe knows one person distant or whatnot, but to actually kind of see it firsthand and even to see how he went about it, for me, I close off for sure as well, similar to he did. But towards the end, I definitely started to open up more because I realized that the more I could share that burden of others, the easier it was going to be on my life.
So is that like one of the lessons you learned from it? The more you could like share with others, is that?
I thought I learned that lesson with sharing the burden, and then I made that mistake again. And then I think I've made a mistake multiple times in my life, but I think that each time I've didn't drag my feet. I learned, I realized I was making that mistake faster. Because you'll see this about me, as we talk, but I've always been a person that's done everything. So to really allow other people to hand off tasks has been a business struggle for me throughout my life. Similar to my dad, I've always been a heavy owner operator, even though I've definitely done a better job than he did. So
I'm going to circle back to that because that's a huge part of, I think our evolution as business owners. I like the way you said it. You've always been a heavy owner operator. So I'm going to anchor on that, but let's move forward for a second. What is the piece of advice that you find yourself sharing the most?
Well, take action for one, that's more common. But the other one that I think that's a little bit more rare that people aren't used to hearing is valuing other people's time as much as it should be. And the real short, quick, in-your-face advice I got from one of my mentors that's very, very high net worth investor is that I was messaging him all these like quick questions like, hey, where can I look up, Grand Rapids rental certificates expiring, things like that. And, he would answer them like in like 5 seconds. Like, man, this guy's an awesome resource. And so I'd keep messaging him. And then finally, I think I caught him on a bad day, I don't know, whatever, but he simply said, if you keep asking me these questions that you can find on Google in 5 seconds, I'm going to start ignoring you. So you needed to figure out how to value my time. Yes, you might be making $40 to $60 an hour and it takes you 3 hours to figure something out. And yes, you can call me and I can tell you in 5 seconds. But what if it takes me 5 minutes and my time is worth $10,000 an hour? How much did you cost me in my time? So realizing that it really allowed me to figure out, one, how to find mentors more frequently, and two, how to figure out how to solicit them too as well. Because I can tell you personally, if you ask me a question I've been asked over and over again, like when I go to local meetups, I get the same question over and over again. Hey, tell me about yourself. And it's like, okay. But then if you ask me, say, hey, I have this scenario where I have this crazy story, what would you do here? That actually gets me excited because I'm like, wow, I wonder what I would do there. Then I might actually call some of my buddies to help you solve the problem because I'm curious of the answer. So I think that's the biggest thing, especially you're starting out newer in this business, that you really have to value other people at what they're worth, not what you think they're worth. Just like I have a consulting business, on average, we charge, over $1,000 an hour. And people will say, like, I can't afford that. Like, that's not worth it. Well, that's because your time is not worth $1,000 an hour. But if your time was worth $1,000 an hour, then you would have no problem paying it. Because I know that what I'm going to teach you, you couldn't learn in the same amount of time that we're going to teach it to you at.
I love it. That's good. Who has had the greatest impact on your life, Charlie?
This answer has changed more frequently, but I would definitely say as of recently, it's been my father. He moved in with us recently, a few months back. And my father's and I relationship, I wouldn't say it was great. I would say it was more of a relationship of respect. He was a workaholic, pretty much worked 7 days a week from 10:30 in the morning till 9:30 at night. So I had to stay up when I was a kid to see him, and then I'd see him in the morning when he dropped me off at school. And that was pretty much the extent of the amount of time I saw my father. And so, to see him struggling, both of his mental and physical health, honestly, there's sometimes selfishly, I think, I don't know if I want to see him like this, and other times I'm just like, I want to take this time to embrace, what limited time I have with them, because we all don't know how much time we have on this earth. And so it's changed how I look at philanthropy. It's changed basically how I just look at spending time with my family, even though I thought I was pretty good already. But I would say that that's easily been the biggest change for me, is kind of just seeing how that mindset happens with, seeing your loved ones kind of, essentially just watch their health decline.
We were talking off camera a little bit, and just even what you're going through with your dad has really caused you to shift even in your career, your business, et cetera, right?
Yep.
What are some
so I've been able to test my business models and systems now to see what the business looks like when I'm absolutely not a part of it. And I can tell you that, so one of the biggest changes that we made to my business model is that we were really doing all aspects of self-storage. And when I was just busy, my dad, like there's a day he went to the ER for a suspected stroke. And I had to sit down and like, okay, of all the things I do, I valued them kind of like what pays me the most amount of time. So, like all the different tasks I do, and then what was worth to me and what I pay somebody else. So like doing my laundry. I actually do like doing my own laundry, but I could pay somebody else $20 to do it, and it's not worth that time for me. So outsource that. And another one of those things was actually asset managing or property managing these properties. So when I looked at it and I compared it to building the facilities, I looked at building facilities. I'm like, wow, my return on time is high four figures, even over upwards of over $10,000 an hour to build a storage facility. Whereas when I asset manage these, it's low four figures or high hundreds of dollars an hour. So we actually pivot our business model now to be more of a build to kind of flip model. So we build them, get the certificate of occupancy, and then sell these facilities to somebody that's willing to stabilize it. So just kind of limiting the operations, because the operations aspect was good return on time. And even though I had my staff doing almost all the work for me, it really just allowed us to focus on what is the greatest return on time for money. And now we also have to continue to focus on basically the care of my family.
What does your team look like?
So I have a lot of third-party vendors that I feel like they basically work for me, but I actually really only have 3 staff members. It's basically a VA, an executive assistant, and my wife. And that's pretty much all it breaks down to. I have another 2 VAs that they work extensively for me, handle bill pay, personal stuff, but they're not actually employees of myself. And then, I have a lot of guys that, I employ for a few months out of the year. So, like my concrete guy, my excavator, they don't work for me, but our relationship definitely makes it feel like we're partners.
I love it. You had mentioned a little bit ago about, being a heavy owner operator. And I'd like to, I'm really curious because you made some comments about, your setback and cancer and you were kind of a do-it-yourselfer. I think this is for the audience and also for me. I've seen, as I go backwards, I don't know if you've ever read the book, The Big Leap, and it talks about upper limits.
Yeah.
I think so many of us go through that evolution. And so I'm curious to go backwards and hearing what I just heard you say, you're primarily using third-party vendors. You're so analytical when it comes to your time and investment, et cetera. Take us back through the journey and back through that, moving from heavy owner operator, going through the cancer scare, even prioritizing like time with your family and the situation with your dad. How has all that looked? And what would be your advice for people that are in that I can do it better myself mode?
So I've had bigger staffs in the past, and actually with the crash and other things, did have to let them go. And the biggest thing I noticed is that the burden that goes with having employees that you're paying on a W-2, it's significantly different from having people that are almost completely employed from you. So that's one thing. The second thing is that going back to kind of talking about that return on time, what I found when you're growing a company, you're either growing it or it's declining. It's really that it stays the same. So one of the things I noticed is that, hey, we're putting in systems, but it never stopped. We're always putting in a system to be more passive, because if you don't grow, your competitors basically are eventually going to basically figure out to outgrow you. And so what I really kind of learned throughout our evolution of our businesses is that you either have to keep growing, or sell the business and exit. Because if you try to stay where you're at, your competitors are not going to just try to stay where they're at. They're going to surpass you. They're going to get more market share. They're going to get more economies of scale. So as a result of that, I really kind of just dumbed my model down to a model where I felt I could sustain it. We could grow it slowly, or we could grow organically. We didn't have to worry about a huge workflow. So like, if something happened again, like, my wife has a health scare, I got to take care of her. My dad basically goes to the hospital. I don't have to worry about, hey, we have all these we have all this huge pipeline of leads we have to work, Dad, Charles, we need your opinion on it, because, these leads that we were kind of working, for example, at one point, they're 7-figure leads. A piece of land that's only $200,000, but we could develop to be a multi-million-dollar storage facility. So that's again, kind of summarizes kind of why I made that transition. It's because it's really difficult to stay at the exact same spot. You're right. It's just like if I lift weights, if I do the exact same workout every single day, chances are I'm not going to stay the same amount of strength. I'm going to actually slowly put on weight over time, whatnot. You have to kind of almost like shock your body. And this comes from my background as a strength and conditioning coach. You have to shock your body every once in a while with new workouts, new regimens, to really basically continue to evolve your body. And that's the same thing with your mind. That's the same thing with your business.
I love that a lot. And just a quick side question. What are you currently, I'm just thinking about, your thought process around, how you analyze value and your time. What are you currently not free from that you want to get free from?
It's funny that you ask that question, is because the things that I've handed off that I like doing, like, to be honest, like I kind of like doing my personal finances. It saved me like maybe 6 hours a month. But then like, the other day, like I just noticed, like I had this $13 charge that nobody caught because it was so small. And I just kept reoccurring. I think I might've responded back to a text message. Yes, they got charged for it. So I think about more of those things, obviously, but I think the biggest thing is the sales. The hardest part about retention, and are you familiar with the DISC model? Yeah. So, we all know that for DISC, SC, which is your admin, your operations team, executive assistant, those people often show time to most loyalty, but your really, really good sales rep, that had that high D, that high I. The problem with them is that they also have the least amount of loyalty, and they're the ones that are basically have the highest value to the company. So you got to pay them the most to retain them. So, we focus on retention as much as possible. But one of the things that's been hard for me to let go of is the sales approach. We have a really good upfront model where my staff can take care of it. But ultimately, to close these deals, the amount of training that goes involved, because it's not like we're trying to solicit a single family owner. I'm oftentimes soliciting like a business owner, a mom and pop owner that has a $25,000 square foot facility. They've operated their whole life. There's an emotional component to it as well, because it's like been their lifestyle for the last 20 years. And we're trying to buy it and then also trying to expand it and maybe even turn into something that they don't recognize anymore. So I think that's been the most difficult thing, is the sales approach side of it, because you want a hunter in that sales position, but if they're too good, they also might be a little bit too entrepreneurial. Because I know I was in that role too as well. I was in multiple sales roles, and to be honest, I really not. It took only one company finally did get my loyalty, and I modeled my business after that company. But all those other companies prior, if I was getting paid more, I was gone.
I'm curious on that note too. I've seen this both ways, and I completely agree with what you're saying. I've heard a version of this where, certain people would say, don't ever hire anybody. In fact, I've got a really good friend that asks in the interview, do you have any desire, to own your own business or blah, blah, blah. And they will absolutely not hire somebody that they think is going to be an entrepreneur or on their own in the next 2 to 5 years. And I'll never forget, I started my first business when I was 24, and I had a business partner. And from our HVAC and plumbing business over the course of 10 years, I sold it in 2014. We probably incubated, 5 to 10 other businesses during that time. And I remember my business partner always being really mad about it. Every time a technician would quit and go start their own business, he would just throw a fit. And I'll never forget him saying, he's throwing a fit. And I said to him, exactly like what we did in 2004, like it's America. And so there's two schools of thought, and I'm just curious where you've landed on this. Some people, like my friend going through an interview, will not hire anybody that they think isn't going to be around in, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. And my school of thought has always been, if I can take a top performer, like you're saying, and get value out of them for each other, like Franklin Covey would say in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, think win-win. And it's truly a win-win. Here's a great example. I had a CEO working for me for 3 years. When I hired him, now he's very entrepreneurial. He used to be my service manager years ago. He owns mobile home parks. He owns insurance companies. And he was kind of retired and bored, even though, because like his businesses were just passive. And I attracted him like 3 years ago. And I said, hey, why don't you come to work for me? And he said, I'll give you 2 years. I knew going into it that I only got 2 years out of him. And I ended up actually getting 3, which was a better benefit. But what's your thoughts on that? Like, have you leaned more toward?
Yeah. So, I mean, because I've been that, I don't want to say disloyal, because I mean, I do feel that when a company showed me appreciation and really made me feel like, hey, we value you, even though I knew I was underpaid, but and then they were still to keep me when I knew I was underpaid. That's when I think kind of things changed. But I'm on the mindset that if you make yourself so invaluable to this company that I have no choice but to give you equity in your company, that's awesome. That's how I look at things. So another way I look at it is, like, I had a conversation with an employee of mine that they probably will end up leaving this company. What we actually are thinking is that there's a number of businesses we're thinking about purchasing. I am actually going to be their investor on it. They're going to sign on the debt, and then they're actually going to exit the company, but we're technically still going to be business partners. So we're going to be leaving on good terms, but I just don't think that the role within the company had matched for them. But what I told them was, listen, we're going to grow by X amount. So let's just say we expect to grow by 30% a year for the next 3 years. If you do such an outstanding job and you grow us by 50% a year for the next 3 years, I have no problem giving you 20% of the company. I'm still getting what I want. And on top of that, I actually know that we have more stability now because I know that you have equity. So I'm on the roll that I don't mind giving up equity as long as it's earned.
That makes a lot of sense. I like that. Yeah. So I don't know. That's another great version of it, because I'm of the school of thought, man, that, I mean, with equity, without equity, like I would rather have a 1 or 2 or 3 year productive relationship with somebody than not have a great relationship, because I'm thinking if it isn't a 10 or 20 year relationship, it doesn't work. So I like that perspective too of, trying to tie in equity, which actually I'm at the point too. And I've said this so many times, like in the past, I've built all my businesses on my back, and then I start replacing myself. And really going forward, I'm looking to build key, strategic relationships going into it. And I'm willing, you've said this so many times in this interview in different ways, but I'm much more willing to give away a certain percentage of the pie and not have to be 100% of it. And not have to, build all that out on my back. There's only a few things that I'm really good at too. And that's the other thing that I've realized is if I can surround myself with people that are of the skill set that are, complementary to me. One of my mentors always said, if two partners have the same strength, one of them's not needed. If we can assemble a group of 4 or 5 or 6 partners, even better. So what are the 1 or 2 or 3 things that you're really great at?
I'm not trying to brag or anything, but that's probably my problem. My biggest problem is that I'm good at a lot of things. I'm a really fast learner. My Twin Oaks Capital, like when you look at my background, I'm a licensed builder, building construction management. I worked in commercial lending, so I got the finance piece down. I've done private lending within our company. We do feasibilities consulting. I have a continuing education school for realtors. And then on top of it, I'm invested in a lot of other or just classes outside of self-storage. So, that be honest is my problem is that because if you're a fast learner, you generally can become good at a lot of things quickly, which to kind of tie it back to that same situation about like, let's say you have an employee that's really, really good for 2 years. The other thing that people realize this too, is that I worked in an operations role like that too. They had me for 6 months. And essentially like the guy kept coming back to me. He's like, how did you do that so fast? How do you do that? And I'd be like, oh, I just created shared folders between the 2 computers. And it's like, oh, you can do that. And so I made their process even more efficient by being such a high performer. And so we have a military mindset kind of in this company from the standpoint that you are always training your replacement, either because you're going to leave the company and we want to get that training time down, or more importantly, hopefully we're always promoting you. So that way you're promoting your replacement. So from that aspect, I can tell you that was one of my fears is, okay, well, now I got to train somebody else and go through all that trouble again. Well, no, we don't, because our standard operating procedures for training somebody new is foolproof. I know this because my 10-year-old daughter is the one that's actually fact checking it. I give her $1 to review a standard operating procedure, and that's how she goes through it. So really, I think the bigger question would be, what are my weaknesses? And that's really what it is. My biggest weakness is, not giving out tasks as fast as I probably should. I've always liked to learn tasks and then teach it. It's time to, and now I've been doing it more of trusting my staff to learn it and then teach it to somebody else in the staff.
I've heard that same, I was actually with Don Wenner from DLP Capital just this last Monday. And he kind of mentioned the same thing. He's really good at and he's built this amazing organization, and, they have a huge investor list and just an amazing, amazing company. Yeah. My wife and I went and visited him for a day and got to spend a day with him. But he said kind of the same thing, that while he has built an amazing organization, he also said that, not letting things go soon enough because he's so good at, being the integrator and being in the weeds. And no, I shouldn't say in the weeds, because that's not what he said. Being the integrator. He's like, I'm a visionary and an integrator. I'm good at being an integrator. And most of us that are visionaries are, because we didn't wake up one day as entrepreneurs and realize all of a sudden we're visionaries. We built our businesses through the ranks and we become really good at a lot of different things. And we have such a hard time of replacing that. But that's also why you talk to, if you talk to 20 entrepreneurs that are on the EOS system and they know they're a visionary, 18 of them probably are having a hard time finding an integrator because they can't fully, release that over time. And so it's an interesting conversation. Let's get into the tactical side of the self-storage space. Tell me kind of like the progression and what you guys are working on now and what you're excited about. And you have this amazing speaker event coming up. That's cool.
Yeah. So my start, you mentioned kind of the beginning, self-storage has been running around for a while, but this last 5 years, it just feels like kind of it's been everywhere, and the exposure to self-storage I had was, my father had an apartment complex, and then the guy across the street had a self-storage facility. Called my dad's accountant and basically said, hey, do you want to buy this self-storage facility? And we quickly found out that self-storage was actually a really good pairing for multifamily. One of our trade secrets, it's probably not as much of a trade secret now, is that we used to offer all the tenants a free month of storage at the storage facility across the street. You do that, and then they leave their stuff there, and then they're too lazy to leave it, so they stay after that free month. But when we sold that off, it was like, oh my gosh, this industry, we're never going to sell any higher. I think we sold like $40 something square foot. It's never going to get. And then magically, we saw the industry kind of get taken over with technology. So I was actually doing a lot on the multifamily side. And then what happened is that as we got bigger, we started passing on these smaller deals. But I had been doing so much direct marketing and cold calling sales leads, through my staff, that we still have these leads we want to convert, because it's kind of like, well, they're coming in at free of charge to us. So what do you want to do with it? So then we started basically selling those to our clients. And then because of this huge run up on the market, those clients are kind of like, oh yeah, that property you sold me and appreciate $100,000 times 6. Now we want to get a multifamily as well. And so that was actually kind of one of the reasons why, I did want to get back into self-storage, and I don't want to compete against my clients on the multifamily side, because that was a pretty strong income. Like, I'd sell a property for them, our brokers would get a $60,000 commission, and then we turn around and sell another property because they had 1031 it, and then you make like another $100,000 commission. So it's like, wow, we're making 6 figures basically off broking this. So that was kind of the timing to basically get into self-storage. And then during that time, being the grinder that I am, I basically did prove-it deals where I while I was still seeing these storage owners that weren't quite interested in selling, I would just look at these deals like, man, you're so far below market rent. You're just so scared to make Billy's mom upset or the soccer team head coach mad, because, you just don't want to get lip service from them for raising prices. So I went to these guys. I'm like, you know what? Just let me do this for you. Just pay me like, some small 4-figure sum, and you're going to make this back through rent raises right away. And all I ask is that you pay this fee, but when you do sell your self-storage facility, I get the first no. So if you're going to sell it, let me market it or let me buy it first. If I can't do what you want, then that's fine, but just give me the first go at it. And so essentially, I take a facility that had like a $12,000 rent roll. I charge them $6,000 for 3 months to basically turn on the facility. And essentially what I would do is I'd go through the nightmares of raising tenant rents 25 to 40% off. I make that owner look like, I make them feel sorry for him. Like, oh yeah, Pete just couldn't handle, people coming to his house at 12 o'clock at night saying they can't pay the rent because their mom was in the hospital. Texting him, saying, hey, can I just get one item out? All these things, that he basically made it like, just a crazy hour job for him. And so then essentially at the end of those 3 months, facilities running, we've trained these people to basically do things our way. Owner comes in, knight in shining armor, like, oh, hey, I'm back. Magically, the rents stay exactly where they're at. And people like him way more than like us, because we purposely made ourselves a scapegoat. And in that process, I was getting paid, although not a very good dollar amount, to basically learn on the job. And essentially, I basically learned on the job with 3 or 4 other facilities how to perfect that approach. So by the time I ended up buying my first facility on my own, the operations piece was on lockdown. There was no way anybody was going to operate it better than me as a first-time operator.
That's pretty cool. I like it. So what's the progression been? Bring us to today. What's going on?
Yeah, so now primarily we're just focused on self-storage development. So we find the sites in-house, and then also we're doing a lot of consulting. So we do feasibility studies nationwide, and we also do consulting on quite a few new builds. I didn't realize how much I'd still keep learning, but from each of these consulting gigs, I always learn something new. Most of the time it's a different ordinance for a different state or something else you got to be worried about. This type of insect that destroys this soil in this state, things like that. But that's really kind of what we pivoted our model to, because when I looked at all the things that were best return on time, the building aspect of it was just so much more profitable than other aspects of the business. The other thing about it too, as well, is that, it's like we got BPO on one of our storage facilities, and that was only about $10 a square foot to stabilize it than what we thought if we basically kind of just held it. But then I looked at it, I'm like, wait, so little known fact, but if you buy a storage facility with SBA financing and it's a construction loan, SBA does actually take over or kick in until after you complete the construction. So the bank actually kind of carries the note temporarily. But as a result of that, there's actually like a 2 to 4 month window where if you sell in that 2 to 4 month window, so you don't have to pay all the SBA penalties and all that crazy stuff like that. So that's a significant savings. And then I look at, okay, well, now the interest carry, all the whole cost we have to stabilize it. I'm like, so when I really look at it, I'm like, it's only like $4 to $6 a square foot more, but somebody else will do it because that's at least some value add for them too. Plus, the other thing about it is if you ever taken over a multifamily or a large business with lots of tenants, those first couple of months of implementing your policy is kind of a nightmare. So sometimes it's nicer just to buy an empty facility, because then you just get implement your policies from the get-go, right? That's also why we like new builds, because there's no surprises. Once we figured out the soil. I'm not going to have like, oh, there's rotting wood behind this wall on a house I just took down, right?
Yeah.
So that's why we kind of just looked at that model, like, you know what, we can leave meat on the bone for somebody else, but then I'm only doing 2 to 4 deals a year on average. I'm not doing a ton. I'm not super high volume. We consult on a lot more, but on average, those 2 to 4 deals for me are worth, 7 figures of potential, net worth that is going to be added on. So if I can, just do less management on those 4 facilities that we're building out and do 2 more instead, that's a lot more meaningful to my time. It's going to have a net worth. And it's also what I enjoy the most in the business too, as well. So between those 3 things, it's a no-brainer. So that's how we've evolved our model since then. Now, I do still like getting in on the consulting operations side, because I mean, it's amazing how many different ways I've seen people handle logistics for RV boat parking, for example. So sometimes if I see a gig, I'm like, wow, this is a really complex job. I'll do my fee a little bit cheaper, because I'm very curious to see how this plans out. And, I have a lot of expertise to bring in above. For example, like if you're building in Alaska, there's obstacles that you just simply don't have. Even when I'm building in Northern Michigan, like frost laws, they are absolutely crazy. So that's really what I've been doing. And again, I'm getting paid to also learn a little bit on the job. Not learning a lot, but I am learning a little bit on almost each of these sites. And also the other thing about it too, as well, is I'm so hands-on with this consulting too, as well. That it always works out better for the client, because like if I find a problem that I don't know the answer to, even if it may not be included in the consulting package, I'm like, I want to figure this out, because that's the type of person I am. I'm a problem solver. So
who's your ideal consulting client? Are you dealing with people that this is their first acquisition, or are you dealing with people that this is their first acquisition? Are you dealing with institutional? Who's your ideal consulting client?
Most of the time they're first time investors, or there's somebody that has had a facility but they bought existing but they want to expand or add more on. So like we do site planning. So people don't realize how important it is to just like get the site plan appropriate. Most people, what they'll do is they'll tell their engineer, just give me as much storage as you can on the site. And it's like, okay, well, when you give somebody that little direction, they're just going to charge you for hours nonstop. So we do things like site planning. We do things like the feasibility study. We even do the pro forma. So if you want a full 17-page pro forma that you want to give to your bank, we actually will do that too as well. So we're full service on that aspect. But our typical client, and I actually got this from being on a podcast from somebody else, kind of talk about my problems, is that it allowed me to keep my fees lower, but I found that I was spending too much time having conversations with people that just simply were not qualified for the program. They're making $40 an hour. There's no way they're going to pay $1,000 an hour. At that point in time, it does make sense for you to spend the extra 20 hours to learn that. So then what he did was he helped me create a spreadsheet. I paid him basically a small finder's fee to screen the person. And then all he had to do was basically complete the survey out. If they hit one of the responses, that was an automatic qualifier. We just simply say, we don't believe this is a fit for you. And then it just automatically cancel them out. If they were qualified, then it came to me. And that allows me to spend a lot less time, talking in front of 150, 200 people asking about my consulting program, because right off the bat, I know that they have the wherewithal, whether it's they've spent the last 2 years trying to get into self-storage, they have the money where their time is worth so much that it's worth them to pay it. We're not spending time with people that are kind of, oh, I've just been thinking about developing last storage for the last 2 weeks or whatnot. So that's been probably the biggest evolution there. And now it's been a big thing for me saving time, is leveraging our people. All these podcasts I've been on, that now they can offer it too. If they know something that comes across them for self-storage, I can pay them a pretty good referral fee simply just by giving them this quick survey to complete and screen them out.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So you got a big speaking event coming up. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I recently was announced. Well, I knew ahead of time, but then they said that the official one wouldn't come later. So I was kind of nervous, like, are you guys going to screw me and like take it away? So it was like, it's kind of like announcing the birth of your child. You're really excited, you want to tell everybody, but you don't want to see it too soon. So I will be a national speaker at ISS in April 2023, the World Expo in Las Vegas. And they actually changed the topic name, but I actually like it better. But I think it's my pain, your gain, learn from my struggles in self-storage. So it's kind of basically talking about all the things I've learned for building self-storage as efficiently and cheaply as possible, while still maintaining quality, because I'm literally right there doing the building construction management myself.
Wow. I love it. It's exciting. Well, as we're kind of wrapping this up, I want to be cognizant of your time. What have we not covered that you want to share? And lastly, after that, where can people find you?
Yeah, so I mean, you did a pretty good job kind of covering everything. So I don't think I have anything else to add. As far as adding me, I'm not great about being on social media as much as I should. But the easiest way to access me would be at Instagram at Charles C and then my last name Kao. So Charles C Kao. And then if you're looking for this content, you want to learn about self-storage or one of the other aspects of the businesses that we're investing in. That would be on YouTube at Twin Oaks Capital. Just Twin Oaks Capital. If you just search on YouTube, you'll find our company page.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been a great show. And I think it's really just cool the way that you're taking the consulting approach and obviously, I mean, speaking on stage at the international event in Vegas, that's going to be huge for you. So, yeah, I just appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom, man. I know that the storage industry itself has a huge future ahead of it. And I just think that whole consulting model is really unique because, I've been in a lot of different asset classes, if you will, and I've never really thought overly about storage other than, as I'm exiting some of my real estate portfolio personally, I'm like, I got to get some exposure to this industry because it's really exciting and intriguing. Well, cool. I appreciate your time, man. And if I can do anything for you, let me know. But yeah, I encourage the listeners to reach out to Charles, and heck, maybe some of you are interested in getting into storage or need a consultant. Go ahead and reach out to him. So appreciate your time, brother.
Cool. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.